What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a look at Code Vein 2, a Souls-like that is set to release in full tomorrow, however is currently in its early access for pre-orders period. But that's not actually how I'm bringing you this. Bandai Namco reached out and asked if I would like to take a look at the game, and obviously I agreed to that, and that's why we're here now. But the other reason being that a lot of people had been asking me about Code Vein 2 because I do play a fair few Souls-likes. However, while I wanted to help give people an idea of what's going on with this game, the reason I've made no attempt to review this, or plans anyways, is because I have not played the first game at all, and I would prefer to have that context before jumping into this one fully, especially since, if you look at the early Steam reviews for this, there are basically two main complaints. People who don't care for how this game evolved from the first game, and also some people having problems with performance. Now, I didn't really have any performance issues personally, but I saw enough complaints about it that people should probably take note of exactly that. But with that stuff out of the way, let's dive into the rest of this. So, Code Vein 2 puts us in a world where, as with any Souls-like, we'll be fighting our way through it. However, the catch here being time travel. Basically, there's this thing called the Luna Rapaces, I believe it is, and this is turning revenants or vampires, from my understanding, into mindless monsters that have to be hunted down. The other issue here is that the event, the Luna Rapaces, is apparently going to cause the inevitable destruction of the world unless you can start doing some time traveling in order to put a stop to that, which is where our friend Lou here comes in, as she can facilitate said time travel and allow us to do the exploration that we need to do to, of course, effectuate the story. But before we do that, you first have to make a character. Now, I will say the character creation specifically of this game is actually pretty interesting, if only for the way it approaches things like layered clothing, alongside a whole host of customizable stuff. I like the way that they actually did a pretty, I would say, robust character creator, even if the visual art style isn't obviously going to be for everybody. However, as this game is loosely based around the idea of vampires, hence the name Code Vein, it is important that everybody addresses my new goth character as his appropriate name, Night Pain. Once you're done with all that, however, we can get into the bulk of the rest of the game, as you will be awoken from some sort of slumber by Lou, who's going to help you get to work here. Now, the curious thing is that at least portions of this game seem fairly free roam in terms of exploration and how you approach them. Basically, a large open area with some dungeons scattered here in between. You won't, however, be alone, though, because one of the first big mechanics I want to talk about is the partner system. So, we first meet up with a guy named Noah in the past who becomes your first major partner, it would seem, and the gist of it seems to be this game's take on the typical summoning system that people use to get by tough boss fights. Essentially, you'll have a partner sort of equipped to your character, if you will, and that partner will be able to either provide large buffs as well as a special trait, or you can have them fight alongside you with that trait as opposed to the larger buffs. Now, either way, they're going to lend a portion of their health to yours, called their immortality points, and as long as those are still active on you, you get the bonuses and stuff from that character. However, once you get into your own HP, that goes away until you heal up. Regular healing items will restore this, but that's the gist of it. So you can alternate between these characters helping you physically, or just providing like stat boosts and the like. And I think that's an interesting way to bridge the typical gap that summoning comes with, which they take even one step farther, because if you die while your summon is up, it will actually restore you to life, then go on a short cooldown, and then if you can live long enough for your summon to reappear physically, it will just revive you again. And in that way, there is a little bit of leeway in terms of when death actually comes for you. So that's a pretty interesting system in and of itself, and while I am curious to see how stuff like that works, much of the rest of the game is very standard Souls-like stuff, checkpoints, run around, rest at those, gain experience from killing things that then acts as your currency that you'll use to level up and the like. I will say leveling up does not see you picking stats, you rather just kind of get the baseline, with stats being affected by things like your various types of forma. Now, you have some default forma, which are your equipables more or less. There's a defensive one, an offensive one, things like that. However, you can also attach weapon forma to your chosen weapon type, which will then give you like special moves you can perform with that weapon. On top of that, you also get blood codes, seemingly with the people that you are bonded with in large part, as maxing proficiency with a blood code, which seems to just be like a general equipable tailored to a certain playstyle. You will then be able to take that and speak to the person you got it from, and then that upgrades the thing. But then on top of even stuff like that, there's also boosters and the like that you'll be able to equip and customize. Changing out your various forma tends to affect your stats, and also more practical things like how your blocking is attached to your defensive forma. So they start you off with a basic like sort of shield one, but then you can grab one that is actually more suited towards parries or just different types of blocking and damage mitigation in addition to just straight up dodging. Now, I will say the defensive side of things in particular does seem a little clunky to me in this game compared to other Souls-likes, in the sense that because you have to sort of pick and choose exactly what type of damage mitigation you would like in that way, it can be a little bit tricky because, for instance, the parry one, sometimes depending on your Ichor or the thing that actually powers your typical like weapon abilities and the like, if you don't have it, the parry one will actually see you take health damage anyway, which makes it a little difficult to use that as its defensive tool intention, because the second you're out of Ichor, you start taking a ton of damage anyway. So I only played for a couple hours, maybe there's more that feel a little better, but on the defensive side of things in particular, I was having trouble finding something that actually felt good to use, as opposed to just dodging. And then the problem with dodging is I noticed that some of the timing on things like bosses could be a little rough, in that dodging one attack actually puts you into like guaranteed getting hit by the follow-up, simply because of like the pacing of the dodge itself, which would probably be my main gripe about the game as a whole at the moment, at least towards the beginning here. But there's still a few more things to talk about. There's also the drain mechanic. So as with a lot of these games, you can stagger enemies and then perform a big follow-up hit, and that is a drain attack, but you can also perform drain attacks independent of these things. And these are attacks that basically bleed your opponents and give you the blood or the Ichor from that attack to power up, things like your weapon abilities, stuff like that, and keep you on the offensive. And I think that's, again, a sort of interesting enough mechanic. I'd be curious to see how important that stays over the course of the game, as I believe it's meant to be pretty central to, again, sort of supplying and fueling your own abilities. But other things I wanted to talk about. So, at least at the beginning, the first few dungeons are surprisingly small, to the point where that thing Souls-likes tend to do in, more like legacy dungeon situations where they often provide like shortcuts and loopbacks. At least here in like the first few hours, that just hasn't been necessary, purely because the 3 dungeons I've done are pretty tiny. Very easy to navigate, if anything else, which then, of course, at the end, you fight a boss. And I was happy to see a little bit of quality of life here with the addition of not exactly a checkpoint, but a place that you will resurrect right outside the boss. Now, unfortunately, while that's nice because you don't have to do like a longer run back unnecessarily once you've got to the end of it, I did also notice that if you die, your haze, as it's called, or your experience basically gets left inside the arena, which means if you go into a fight with some experience and die, you have to keep going back in and manually collect it, because if you don't, you're going to lose it. And that's something a lot of other Souls-likes have adjusted since by putting it outside of the boss arena before you step into, as an example. So there's certainly that at the very least. But if I were to play this more, some things I would be curious to see. I believe once you get out of the initial area, basically just past where I am now, that the game opens up in terms of size, because there are like things from the marketing and screenshots that show you riding off this like motorcycle type thing, which certainly implies some larger explorable zones. And then the main sort of exploration reward that I found for actually running around the zone that I was in were these plants that gave you golden nectar, which allows you to upgrade your regeneration, effectively allowing you to heal more in between rests. Typical Souls-like stuff, basically. And I'd also be curious, outside of the forma and the exploration handles rewards, because I think once you get into your sort of main play style, and then you've also got that stuff maxed out, is actually running around these zones going to be compelling, because even the sort of introductory area seemed a little sparse to my mind. So, all told, Code Vein 2 is an interesting game in the sense that it's doing some stuff that I thought was cool, some stuff that I don't really care for so much. And while I don't have any immediate plans to review this, eventually I would like to play the first game, and then I would likely follow that review up with this second one. And the thing that intrigues me about the potential of that specifically is the way the build system works. It does seem like you have a lot of different options in terms of how you approach making any individual build or play style, thanks to how freely you can swap out individual pieces of what they've got going on here. And for myself, at least, that would be my primary interest in playing this title and seeing how well that specifically actually pans out, as, to be honest with you, I could take or leave the rest of it. But as for today, I think that's pretty much going to wrap it up. Certainly hope you enjoyed this look at Code Vein 2. If you've tried it for yourself, you're looking forward to playing it, or whatever else, I'd love to hear what you think, which naturally means to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.